Life in the shadow of my perfect sister. The sweet revenge I took on my wedding day. Sure, here's an extensive story script focusing on the theme, life in the shadow of my perfect sister. The sweet revenge I took on my wedding day. Chapter 1. Growing up in her shadow. From the moment I could remember, my sister, Claire, was the golden child, born with what everyone would describe as an almost otherworldly grace and charm. She lit up any room she walked into. People adored her, and why wouldn't they? Claire excelled at everything she did, academics, sports, and even social events. I was just a couple of years younger than her, but it felt like I was living in an entirely different universe. While Claire was celebrated for her achievements, I was often overlooked, always the nice sister who blended into the background. My parents, while loving, seemed to unconsciously prioritize Claire's accomplishments over my own. I tried my best to shine, but every time I thought I had finally found my moment, it would be overshadowed by her brilliance. The comparisons began at an early age. Whether it was in sports, where Claire would score the winning goal, or in academics, where she would bring home straight A's, I felt like I was always trailing behind. I remember a day in elementary school when we had a talent show. I had practiced my heart out for weeks to perform a song, only to have Claire step in and captivate the audience with her own performance. In that moment, all I felt was a crushing wave of defeat. Growing up, I learned to suppress my feelings, to cheer for her achievements while hiding my own frustrations. I wanted to be happy for her, but I couldn't help but feel a deep-seated jealousy that crept in like a shadow. As we entered our teenage years, the gap between us only seemed to widen. Claire blossomed into a stunning young woman, effortlessly attracting friends, admirers, and accolades wherever she went. I, on the other hand, was awkward and still trying to figure out who I was. My wardrobe choices were often a year behind, and my social skills felt rudimentary compared to her effortless charm. Every family gathering served as a reminder of Claire's perfection. During dinner conversations, my parents would recount stories of her recent accomplishments. Did you hear about Claire winning the science fair? Or Claire's going to be in the lead role of the school play. It felt like I was living in a never-ending highlight reel of her life, while mine was barely mentioned. I became accustomed to the feeling of being invisible. If I received any recognition, it was usually followed by, "Well, you're no Claire, but good job." Those words cut deeper than any compliment could heal. I felt like a shadow cast by her light, forever flickering in her brilliance. In high school, I tried to carve out my own identity. I joined clubs, took up hobbies, and worked hard to excel academically. But no matter what I did, it always felt like Claire was one step ahead. If I joined the debate team, she won the Best Speaker award. If I joined a dance class, she stole the show in the recital. I felt like I was constantly running, trying to catch up, but the finish line kept moving further away. And the most painful part was the way my parents looked at me, loving yet disappointed, as if they were expecting me to be a different version of myself. It was a constant reminder that I was not enough. When the day finally came for Claire to get engaged, it felt like my heart dropped into my stomach. She announced her engagement to Mark, the most charming and successful guy in our social circle. Everyone adored him, and of course, they were excited to celebrate Claire's big day. I forced myself to smile and celebrate, but inside, I felt like I was suffocating. As the days passed and the wedding plans unfolded, I became more of a spectator in my own life. Family gatherings turned into planning sessions, with everyone buzzing about the details of Claire's wedding. My parents were consumed with excitement, and I often felt like an afterthought. I was tasked with the role of the supportive sister, helping with some of the wedding details while secretly battling feelings of resentment. It felt unfair that my life seemed to be put on pause while Claire's life took center stage. I couldn't shake the feeling of being a pawn in someone else's fairy tale. As the wedding date drew closer, the pressure mounted. The wedding plans took on a life of their own, and it felt like Claire was the lead actress in a grand production while I was merely a stagehand. I didn't want to feel this way, but every time I saw Claire's radiant smile or heard her talk about her wedding dreams, the feelings of envy bubbled to the surface. In the months leading up to the wedding, Claire transformed into a bride-to-be. She glowed with excitement, and every time we spoke, it was about the wedding. The colors, the flowers, the dress. It was as if I had stepped into a world where I no longer existed. I volunteered to help plan the bridal shower and bachelorette party, desperately trying to maintain the facade of the perfect sister. But inside, I was churning with emotions that I could hardly articulate. I wanted to support her, but I also craved acknowledgement and recognition for my efforts. During the bridal shower, I watched as Claire received a flood of gifts and praises from friends and family. I found myself standing in the corner, sipping my drink and forcing a smile. When someone complimented Claire's beauty and grace, I felt a familiar sting. It was as if they were completely ignoring my presence. As I returned home that evening, I couldn't shake the feeling of bitterness. I felt trapped in a cycle of supporting my sister, while yearning for the validation I never received. It dawned on me that I had spent my whole life in Claire's shadow, and the thought of this continuing into my adulthood made me furious. The idea of revenge started as a fleeting thought, a whisper in the back of my mind. What if, on her big day, I could finally have a moment of my own? I didn't want to ruin her wedding. I didn't want to hurt her. But I wanted her to realize that I was not just her sidekick, that I had my own identity, my own worth. The more I thought about it, the more the idea grew. I began planning small moments of revenge in my head, nothing harmful, just enough to remind her that I existed and that I deserved recognition. 2. It was a childish notion, but the idea fueled me in a way I hadn't felt in years. I decided to go all out for my dress. If she was going to be the perfect bride, then I would be the stunning sister. I found a beautiful gown that made me feel confident and radiant. It was a striking shade of deep burgundy, a color that I knew would stand out in contrast to her pristine white dress. I wanted to steal a few glances, to turn heads in the way that Claire always did. This was my moment, a chance to feel beautiful in a way I hadn't experienced before. And I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. The day of the wedding arrived, and I was a mix of excitement and nerves. The venue was breathtaking, adorned with flowers, twinkling lights, and decorations that spoke of elegance and grandeur. As the ceremony approached, I could see Claire in her beautiful wedding gown, radiant and glowing with happiness. But this time, instead of feeling overshadowed, I took a deep breath and embraced my own beauty. When it was time for the ceremony to begin, I walked down the aisle with confidence, knowing that I had worked hard to be present on this day. During the ceremony, I focused on Claire and Mark, watching as they exchanged vows and shared their love for one another. But when the time came for the reception, my plan began to unfold. As guests started to mingle, I made my way to the dance floor. Claire and Mark had their first dance, and as they twirled together, I felt an unfamiliar surge of pride. I could finally see my sister for who she was, not just the perfect sister, but a woman who was embarking on her own journey. As the evening wore on, I noticed the music change to a more upbeat tempo. I took a deep breath, feeling my heart race as I walked over to the DJ and requested a song. It was a bold choice, one that I knew would catch everyone's attention. When the music started, I stepped onto the dance floor and began to dance. It wasn't just any dance, it was a performance. I poured all my pent-up feelings into the moves, letting go of the resentment and frustration I had held for so long. To my surprise, guests began to gather around, clapping and cheering me on. I danced with abandon, every spin and leap igniting the energy in the room. I could see Claire watching me, her eyes wide with surprise. In that moment, I felt a shift, an acknowledgement of my existence. As I danced, I saw Claire's smile fade slightly, but I didn't care. This was my moment. I was no longer in her shadow. I was finally stepping into my own light. The thrill of being seen and appreciated was intoxicating. When I finished, the crowd erupted in applause. I took a moment to catch my breath, exhilarated and liberated. And then I saw Claire approaching me with a mix of pride and surprise. "Wow, you really stole the show," she said, her eyes shining. I could feel the air shift between us, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of connection. After the dance, Claire and I found a quiet corner away from the crowd. She looked at me with a newfound respect, as if seeing me for the first time. "I didn't know you had that in you," she admitted, a hint of admiration in her voice. "You really brought the house down." I felt a rush of emotion, relief, happiness, and even gratitude. "I've always been here, Claire. I just never felt like I could shine." She nodded slowly, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. "I guess I never realized how much pressure it put on you," she said softly. "I'm sorry for that." In that moment, we both laid our cards on the table. I shared my struggles of living in her shadow, my feelings of resentment, and how I had often felt invisible. To my surprise, she listened intently, her eyes softening with understanding. "I never wanted to overshadow you," Claire admitted, her voice filled with sincerity. "I always looked up to you, even if it didn't seem that way. You're so talented, and I want you to know that." Her words felt like a balm to my wounded heart. For the first time, I could see my sister as a human being, not just the golden child, but someone who had her own pressures and expectations. The rest of the wedding unfolded in a haze of laughter, dancing, and joy. I realized that this day was not just about Claire and Mark, but also about me finding my place within our family. As we shared stories, laughed, and danced, I felt a shift in our relationship. The sweet revenge I had sought transformed into a newfound understanding. Claire was no longer just my perfect sister. She was also my ally. After the wedding, our relationship changed for the better. We found ourselves confiding in one another, sharing our dreams, fears, and aspirations. I learned to embrace my identity outside of her shadow, and she learned to appreciate the depth and complexities of our bond. In the months that followed, I continued to grow and flourish. Claire's wedding had been a turning point, a moment of realization that I didn't have to be defined by her success. I began to pursue my passions wholeheartedly, carving out my own path. Claire and I often reminisced about the wedding, sharing laughs about how far we had come. The sweet revenge I took on that day turned into a deeper understanding of sisterhood, and I no longer felt the burden of resentment. Our family dynamic evolved as we both embraced our individuality, supporting each other's dreams and aspirations. I learned that being in the shadow of someone doesn't diminish your own light. It can illuminate your path in ways you never expected. Today, I stand proud of who I am, a woman with her own identity, passion, and purpose. Claire and I may have started as sisters living in the shadow of each other, but we have since become a force to be reckoned with, united by love, laughter, and the beautiful journey we share. As the dust settled from the whirlwind of Claire's wedding, I began to notice subtle shifts in our relationship. The unexpected moment of connection during the reception had cracked open a door I didn't realize was closed. We started having lunch together more frequently, sharing our thoughts and feelings in ways we hadn't before. One sunny afternoon, as we sipped iced tea on my back porch, I decided to broach a subject that had lingered in my mind since the wedding. "You know, Claire, I've always felt like I was in your shadow," I began hesitantly. Claire looked thoughtful for a moment before responding. "I never wanted you to feel that way. I guess I was just so focused on my own life that I didn't see how it affected you." Her honesty touched me. "It's okay. I think we both had our own pressures. I just wish I could have found my voice sooner." As we talked, I felt the weight of years of unspoken resentment lifting. We shared our experiences growing up, her feeling the pressure to be perfect and me feeling invisible. It was cathartic, a release of emotions that had simmered beneath the surface for too long. In the following weeks, I started to notice changes not only in our relationship, but also within myself. Claire's understanding and encouragement inspired me to take risks I had shied away from before. I enrolled in a writing class, something I had always wanted to do, but had been too scared to pursue. I found joy in expressing my thoughts and creativity, and with every assignment, I grew more confident. As I delved into writing, I discovered a voice I didn't know I had. I began sharing my stories with Claire, who was incredibly supportive. She would read my drafts, offer constructive feedback, and cheer me on. For the first time, I felt like I had someone in my corner who genuinely cared about my aspirations. One evening, While we were sitting on the couch with our laptops, I turned to her and said, I think I want to write a book someday about our lives, about sisters, and how we navigate our relationships. Claire's eyes lit up. That sounds amazing. You have such a unique perspective. I think people would really resonate with your story. Her enthusiasm fueled my passion, and I began jotting down ideas. It was exhilarating to envision a project that could help others understand the complexities of sibling relationships, especially when one sibling seems to overshadow the other. As I wrote, I poured my heart into the pages, detailing not just my struggles, but also my journey towards self-acceptance. Claire became my sounding board, and our late-night writing sessions turned into deep discussions about our childhood, our dreams, and the importance of supporting one another. As my writing progressed, I noticed a shift in the family dynamics as well. My parents, witnessing the newfound bond between Claire and me, began to pay closer attention to our individual achievements. They started celebrating my accomplishments, whether big or small, and it felt like a long overdue acknowledgement. One day, my mom called me into the living room. "We need to talk," she said, her tone serious yet warm. My heart raced, unsure of what to expect. "We've realized that we might not have given you the recognition you deserve," she continued. "We've always been so proud of Claire, but we want you to know how proud we are of you too." I was taken aback, overwhelmed by emotion. "Thank you, Mom. That means a lot to me." Claire chimed in. "You've always had your own strengths, and it's time we all celebrate those." It felt like a pivotal moment, a recognition that I had been craving for so long. With my parents acknowledging my individuality, I felt empowered to embrace who I was without fear of comparison. As the months went by, I continued working on my book, pouring my heart into each chapter. I wrote about the challenges of growing up in Claire's shadow, the pressure of expectations, and the eventual liberation I found in embracing my identity. After countless revisions and edits, I finally finished the manuscript. The feeling was surreal, and I knew I had to share it with Claire first. I invited her over for dinner and presented her with a printed copy. As she flipped through the pages, her eyes widened in surprise. "You wrote all this? This is incredible." "It's my truth," I replied, my voice shaky with vulnerability. I wanted to capture not just my story, but ours. When she finished reading, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. "This is beautiful. You've captured everything so perfectly. I'm so proud of you." We embraced tightly, and in that moment, I felt a sense of closure. The journey we had been on had brought us closer, and I knew our bond would only grow stronger from here. A few months later, I decided to take the leap and publish my book. It felt like a culmination of everything I had worked for, the struggles, the breakthroughs, and the evolution of my relationship with Claire. On the day of the launch, I hosted an event at a local bookstore. Friends, family, and even some of my classmates came to support me. I felt a whirlwind of emotions as I stood behind the podium, looking out at the familiar faces. Claire was in the front row, beaming with pride. She had helped organize the event and was my biggest advocate. As I began to speak about my journey, I felt a wave of confidence wash over me. I shared anecdotes, laughter, and even a few tears, and as I finished my speech, the audience erupted into applause. After the event, Claire hugged me tightly. "You did it. I always knew you could." Her support meant the world to me, and as we celebrated that night, I realized how far we had come together. Our relationship had transformed from one of rivalry to one of respect and love. As I navigated my newfound identity as an author, I also began to explore my independence in other areas of my life. I started taking solo trips, discovering new places and experiences that allowed me to grow as an individual. Claire often joined me, and we created lasting memories together, whether it was hiking in the mountains or exploring new cities. One weekend, we decided to take a trip to the beach. As we strolled along the shoreline, I turned to Claire and said, "I never thought I could enjoy being around you this much." She laughed lightly, the sound carrying on the ocean breeze. "I feel the same way. It's nice to just be us without the pressure." In those moments, I realized that we were building a new foundation, a sisterhood based on mutual understanding and support. I no longer felt like I was competing for attention or approval. Instead, we were champions of each other's journeys. As Claire settled into married life, I was thrilled to see her embracing her role as a wife. However, she was also carving out her own identity outside of being a perfect sister or a perfect bride. She took up painting, something she had always been passionate about but never pursued seriously. One afternoon, she invited me to her home to see her latest creations. I walked into her studio, where canvases filled with vibrant colors adorned the walls. "These are beautiful," I exclaimed, genuinely amazed by her talent. "It feels so liberating to express myself like this," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "I've spent so long trying to live up to everyone else's expectations. Now, I want to create for me." Her words resonated deeply with me. I understood that the journey we had taken together had allowed us both to find our individual paths while still remaining close. As time went on, the bond between Claire and me continued to strengthen. We started collaborating on projects, combining her art with my writing for a series of illustrated stories. It was a new chapter in our lives, one where we could share our talents and celebrate each other's creativity. Our families began to notice the change as well. My parents often remarked on how they felt a sense of peace in our household, seeing us support one another. Family gatherings transformed into celebrations of individuality, with everyone sharing their passions and interests. I found joy in seeing Claire thrive as an artist while also pursuing my writing career. Our lives were intertwined, but rather than feeling overshadowed, I felt empowered by our connection. Fast forward a couple of years, and my book had gained some recognition, leading to opportunities for speaking engagements. I often shared the stage with other authors, discussing the themes of identity, sibling relationships, and personal growth. One evening, after a particularly rewarding event, Claire surprised me with a beautiful canvas she had painted, a tribute to our journey together. The painting depicted two figures, intertwined yet distinct, with a backdrop of vibrant colors representing our individuality. Tears filled my eyes as I took in the beauty of her work. "This is incredible, Claire. It captures us perfectly. Just like our story," she replied with a smile. "Two sisters who found their way to each other." In that moment, I realized that the journey we had taken had been more than just about competition or resentment. It was about love, growth, and the profound understanding that we could both shine in our own unique ways. As we continued to thrive in our respective fields, I found comfort in the fact that our sisterhood had evolved into something beautiful and enduring. We would always have our struggles, but we had learned to navigate them with empathy and understanding. Looking back on the journey, from the wedding day that had ignited a fire within me to the supportive bond we had forged, I felt immense gratitude. We had transformed our relationship into one of strength, unity, and creativity. Our story became a testament to the resilience of sisterhood. It reminded us that no matter the challenges we faced, we would always have each other's backs. And in a world that often tries to define us by our relationships, we discovered the importance of embracing our own identities while cherishing the bonds that connect us. Together, we stepped into the future, hand in hand, ready to face whatever life had in store. Our lives intertwined, our voices united. We were no longer just sisters. We were a force of nature,